All right. So we talked about, the current state of the market and the future of commercial real estate. But let's talk about marketing and what role it plays. And, let's just have a real talk about the common misconceptions and, how, you think that the commercial real estate industry and the professionals, like the brokers and people, view marketing currently.
Yeah, man, it's a really big conversation. I would say the easiest, lowest hanging fruit, as they always say, in our industry, is that marketing makes things pretty. That and that's pretty much it. Basically, I don't think many people understand what marketing as a strategic partner to the business actually means, and how to work with marketing to make that happen. And if you think about some of the best brands in the world, and I'm sure they have their own issues. I'm sure marketing, I would love to hear what marketing has to say in those companies. But you think about, and you can't, I hear this a lot too, but that's product marketing. Those are products. It's easier. And I'm like, see, I think differently. I think of our people as products. I think every person, has its own unique value. Our properties that we represent, you have to think of those as products. You got to differentiate. And our platform, also a product that you have to differentiate. So to me, you can use a lot of best practices and a lot of the methodologies in product marketing. They're the best, some of the best marketers on the planet. Um, so when I think of it that way, I don't look at what our industry does good stuff. I look around. I follow all of our competitors. I know many of the leaders in our industry, from a marketing standpoint, that I've come to know, by working in it for so long. They're great, brilliant people, and I see what they're doing. But you also have to look at what other industries are doing, what other companies that you admire are doing. And you should look at, UPS and some of their best campaigns, Nike. I mean, and the list goes on, right? You got to look at those emerging brands. You got to look at the older brands, and you got to see like kind of the iterations of what they've done and how they've articulated and how they've differentiated, who they targeted and how it worked, what failed. Also, big opportunities. Look at what fails. I didn't know this. I was looking up the Got Milk campaign. I don't even know how I got onto it, because I was thinking about those types of marketing campaigns and efforts that became part of pop culture. And I mean, there are so many. It's this, I mean, this will age me clearly, but there were campaigns like, how do you spell relief? ROLAIDS, Rolaids. That's old, but it became such a thing. My bologna has first name, OSCAR. Like those types of things, they were ingrained in a period of time. Coke, have a Coke and a smile. And then you just kind of move up. Got Milk was something that I grew up with, and others, and it went for a long time. I think it went for 2 decades. It actually didn't, it was a fail, but not because the campaign was a fail, is because there were dynamics outside of what could be controlled. Dairy industry, health perceptions, plant-based options started to come up. These things just kind of killed dairy. And they did the same with eggs. And you had all those campaigns with the eggs, and the eggs are like, running, and they're, it's just, these types of things, aren't a complete fail because they stuck in our head. And Got Milk got so many celebrities on board, with the mustache. And then it became like a, um, you know, embedded in certain like movies, and as uh, paying reference to that, but making fun of it at the same time. So it's interesting that it didn't work, but for all the different reasons that you couldn't control, and those types of things will impact us too. And so when you think, like, when you're looking at, what's a go-to-market strategy for, say, an asset, and you think you've got the target right, and you think you've got the positioning right, it's a miss. But you've got to watch. You got to see, like, why did God, why did it go on for 2 decades and it wasn't working? If the only area that the sales of milk apparently increase was in the state of California, which I thought was also interesting. But
Oh,
like if it's not working, then you got to pivot. And this goes back to data, but um, you know, marketers should be looking across the board at what gets them and not to also look with blinders because there are things there, I was thinking about I'm not very brand loyal to many things. I like variety, but there are certain ones that I'm very loyal to, and I noticed that, and so I'm like, well, why? Why is that? And
yeah.
what types of packaging call me, in an aisle? Like, why do I abandon a brand because I'm lured in by the packaging and messaging of another so easily? I'm a certain I'm a certain profile, probably.
Mm,
And so you have to be really looking at all of that too. There is that is it's almost like, and I hear this a lot. I hear this from the sales professionals in commercial real estate. That's not commercial real estate. Like, no, it's a human condition.
right. You have to tell a story.
Yeah, you absolutely do. Now, I do see patterns, with some of our client base, especially as it relates to on the investor side. You see patterns. It's, driven by ROI and not a lot of deviation, not a lot of risk taking when it comes to some of the marketing pieces, and rightfully so. But you have to know what's going to motivate people, get them excited, and I think things have shifted, and I think part of that, a lot of that has to do with the momentum of social media. It's been around for a long time. That's not the point. The point is, it's everybody is on their favorite channels every day for hours a day, and they're getting influenced to make purchasing decisions based on it. And it for a while, I was thinking we could do influencer marketing with and hire them and do kind of commercial based. And I still think that's a good idea,
Absolutely. I love
but but at the same time, it's gotta be authentic, and so I've shifted because I'm watching it, and I shifted our strategy. It's like, we need influencers, but inside of not industry players so much, but they influence the industry somehow. So, it could be members of a
Ah,
community, it could be business owners, it could be, community activists, um it could be our own sales professionals. You create these influencers because authenticity is so critical. Nobody wants to be sold because and you'll see it, right? You see it on TikTok all the time, and I have made some purchasing decisions based on what I'm seeing, but if I think about it, they're paid to sell me something that they may or may not use. What we need now is for people to talk about the things that they're passionate about. So we've shifted our strategy to, um, it's really purpose and passion. I love alliteration, by the way. We say people, properties, platform, purpose and passion. Really like those P's. But that's what gets us the highest engagement in our campaigns is if you weave the story about people within whatever it is. If it's a tenant that leases a building, if it's one of our brokers, uh, you know, property managers, executives, if their passion comes through, then engagements, the clicks go higher, um, and it's because I think a lot of us are always looking for answers. Like we want to be inspired, and it's going to bring me to the Nike campaign. We want to be inspired, or we want to aspire to something. So like if we are interviewing, like if we interview a tenant that we place, but that tenant and they're the CEO and they're talking about their passion and purpose or how they got to the place that they are, how they grew a company. So interesting, right? And their peers are going to want to hear it. And so, and you can obviously weave in like how does that move fit the growth objectives? That's a more interesting story than so and so just moved to 50,000 square feet in this asset because of the amenities. It's so much more than that, right?
right,
So like,
right.
I think if you think about Nike, they had there multiple campaigns, but so many strike me. You had the kid, the pitcher who was he had one arm, and that's going to inspire people to overcome whatever challenges they face. They've used athletes because that's, we want to aspire to be our best, our greatest self. And so I think, when we're talking about marketing, you're really touching on that human element. Like, what story are we telling that's going to get people to be excited to read what we or listen to what we have to say?
I
So
think that's such an underrated thing that people don't consider. I feel like storytelling element of marketing in the real estate industry really takes a back seat, and like I see that even in the investment space, because people are like, oh, investors are not going to be emotional about their investments. Like they just want to know that they're going to get tax benefits and all that. It's like, yes, to an extent, but as they grow their portfolio and they invest in more offerings, they're not just going to invest just for that, just for the numbers. They
yeah,
can do it elsewhere. Like what makes you uniquely positioned to get their money? And you're right, it's the people, the team behind it. What's the story with this, type of property? And like you said, if you're featuring the tenants and get their story, like you feel like you're being part of that community, like
mhm,
you're, investing and buying into that. And
right.
I just feel like, I share your pain too with like, marketing makes pretty things. And I think that's often the biggest misconception. And like for me personally, I'm not a creative person. So if you ask me to do a graphic, any
Not a designer
graphic
either.
design,
Yeah, never
right? Like
was.
I would just be like, I have no idea. I don't
Yep,
know if there's an extra space. I wouldn't be the person to tell you. It's like, and the colors, but when it comes to actually thinking about who are you in the market, like your positioning and all that, that has nothing to do with pretty things, but it's actually the work that like it's like the core element of marketing that oftentimes just gets overlooked,
it's
which is
the
really
visual
important.
that's the foundation for visual strategy. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
the storytelling. And I think going back to some of the challenges we face as marketing people is, and it's almost like I want to change the word marketing because it's so much more than that. So I feel like, we're storytellers, whether it's, through written word or through graphic assets and the whole visual strategy, brand, whatever. Um, it it starts with that, that content. It starts with the story. It starts with the written word, and not everybody can do that. Um, and so that's a function of marketing. Content is a function of marketing, as is design, as is brand, as is digital, as is, PR and media. God, there's so many things, business and location intelligence, like so many aspects, operations. What do we do with these analytics? How do we drive better workflows, more efficiencies, reaching people? Like there's so many different analytics that, by the way, that we look at, external, internal. Um, we are constantly right in the middle of everything. And we're almost at, no, we are at every stage of the sales funnel at some point in some capacity. And so really understanding the business. And I think what happens is in our industry is you get people that are organically grown in marketing. So they take a job. I'm one of them, but I went through many, I was in different, I had played different roles to learn the business. But um, there are many people that come up, they, maybe they were a designer and just got out of school. They started in our industry. They become a creative manager, then they become a marketing manager, then they become a director, and who knows? And that might work out. Some of them are really still focused on the creative aspect of things, and so, and when I say creative, I mean visual. And so there are different aspects, and I think because that's more tactical, that's what our industry hires to. And so you have less of a percentage of the true strategists in the platform trying to champion for change in how marketing works with sales
That
or
is
leadership.
oh, that
Yeah.
is so true. And I
Yeah.
think oftentimes marketers, they could see strategies as potential threats, right, to their existence. I feel
Very
like
much.
there's this like sense of like, oh, don't take my job away, or you're downplaying my role. It's like, no, it's not. It's part of marketing, but then you need this other piece of marketing that's crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's hard. That's really hard because I think in the financial services industry and real estate industry, I see that quite a bit that people do become marketers more organically like that. It's not like, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna be a marketer. I'm gonna go in and do all this. It's like people just kind of fall into it,
For
and
sure.
then
And
yeah.
and and the other thing too is there's just a low value half the time placed on marketing. I mean, I just not
Um,
really sure why. And I so um the quote that always comes about that I'm going to totally obliterate because I can never get these right, but somebody just said it to me the other day is like, half the, half like this quote is actually started by somebody I think was born in the 1800s, whatever. And I think and this person attributed this quote to somebody that's in our business right now. And I'm like, nope. But this has been said a million ways to Sundays. I know that half of marketing, generates revenue and the other half, I lose money. I'm murdering this quote. And I know the actual quote. I have to look it up. Um, but I don't know which half. And so people don't know, they don't really understand. Part of it is because it's hard to quantify the ROI of marketing. But that's not. I think you can do that anecdotally. I mean, if your brand is growing and you have to take into account how the market is faring in general, so you have to like create some sort of equilibrium and then see where they're growing. Because again, we're one to many, and sales is one to one. Both of those are working in tandem to create growth. If you're not using a CRM and you don't then say like where these leads are coming from or how they're getting converted, and which will never happen really in our industry in that way. You're not going to go, hey, how'd you hear about us? What convinced you to buy? That's just not our industry. That's not going to ever happen. But we know that we grow brand awareness because like we'll hear it with recruits. We see you everywhere. And that's intentional. Like we use
yeah.
paid ads to follow people around, obviously on their social channels, like many people do. But and that's a tactic. What we focus on in that though is the messaging. That is so hard, and it takes up so much of my team's time. But to explain that is, like why we focus so much of our time and efforts in that area, that's a misunderstanding. Like why content strategy is so critical to your success. I think it's hard for marketers to articulate that and be heard, and have a seat at the table to actually tell that story. Again, because it's long. It's a long-term endeavor. Whereas these campaigns were great. Well, those campaigns came from a lot of strategy, and planning, and content, and understanding the personas we were hitting. So yeah, it's I don't again, I think it just goes back to strategy versus tactics and how you're wired as a human, you know? What we're focusing on in marketing is elevating the business acumen of our people in marketing. And that includes communication and communication preferences internally. So, and so at Stream, we do utilize something called Culture Index to help profile work styles and communication styles. And but to really implement and utilize, that's hard work. You have to look and constantly question, okay, if I'm not being heard and I've said it 10 different times, it's on me then at this point. And it's not, and this is like, well, when you're thinking about an external campaign, this is so crazy because marketers are so good at speaking to external audiences. We're terrible at speaking and convincing and influencing internal audiences, which might be causing our internal audiences to go, do you know what you're doing? It because we get flustered and our our careers depend on being heard. So you're probably not, there's more fear in communicating with your sales professionals than there is in creating a campaign for the external audience that you don't have any knowledge of. But that's, I think, if we could get our marketers to be able to tell that same, what they're really good at, telling a great story internally across the board at every interaction, then I think will help with some of the awareness and understanding of what marketing can do. But oftentimes we're our own worst enemies. And if our marketers in the markets, like in our local markets, um, aren't speaking from the same, from the same script that we are, then it doesn't work. You know, we need.
Yeah, because it's just so easy to give up the long-term strategy just to have
to
quick wins, right?
One, a bit of pushback, any pushback, because and you're talking a lot are more organically grown, heavily on the design side. Um, if you're going to talk about profiles, you know, they're probably not like a dominant strategist, and so if they get pushback, they're gonna just go, okay, because they're jobs. They want to have a good working relationship. They don't want to be seen as difficult. And sometimes we have to push back. It doesn't mean that you aren't service oriented, by the way, which is another thing too. Like with marketing, you could get those that are just stuck like, this is the way that I see it. This is the best creative way, and you're going to take it just as is. And our sales professionals are going, no. You have to work with them in order to get to the best outcome, because they do have tacit knowledge we have to pull from. They do know a lot about the client, and definitely, they may be biased in some ways with the client type they're dealing with. So, but a lot of them are open to hearing and partnering. But you have to know how to work that in. You have to know how to be able to have the conversation about, why are you choosing to say it this way, visualize it this way, approach this way. That should be a conversation that brings about the best possible outcome. So if both parties get stuck in there, I'm right, you're wrong, it will go nowhere. And so that's part of that training that I don't think a lot of marketing people ever get. Even outside of our industry, I don't know that that's a thing. I rarely see it. How do you negotiate? How do you communicate? How do you show up? Are you managing your own brand? And by the way, I'm saying this with a lot of lessons learned, because I've got big fails all across my career, with regards to how I approach, because I can be really um, headstrong. And I have to learn sometimes how to pull back. So this is coming from a place where I get it. We're all coming with a lot of, like, how we're wired and our life experiences, but we have to be so malleable. And I think the biggest takeaway here for both with companies and marketing alike, that flexibility. If you don't have flexibility, I think you fail in general, especially in today's world where things are so fast paced. Our clients have to change the way they operate on a daily. It's fast, especially with the advent of technology. It's changing everything. We have to mirror that as a company. We have to mirror that in marketing. And so we can't be so married to a strategy and approach that we can't go, okay, wait, let's stop. Hold on a second. How's it faring? Where do we need to change? Maybe we were wrong. What can we learn here? Right? Fail fast. I believe in that.
Yeah, and I think you're right that like a lot of marketers are afraid to have that conversation, and that's where the data comes in because you may have had projections or educated guess about, we think that this, campaign is going to work a certain way, and oftentimes it doesn't, or maybe it will be better or worse. But having the conversation can be tough because I think marketers, we see it as personal failures where there's all these external factors, and I feel like sometimes like people's like stubbornness can also get in the way of, oh, I'm not gonna stop the campaign. That's something I champion. But I think you have to be willing to say, it's not really getting the results that we want. Let's pull the plug on that. But that's
Right.
really hard. That's so hard,
really hard,
Yeah.
and you're gonna get rejection, and people are gonna get upset with you, and, um, but I think you have to come at it with solutions and try to be as non-emotional as possible, but, like, it's really hard. It's really hard, and I'd say that in order to change people's the way that we're valued, the way that marketing's valued, the only way that will change is if we show up as a true partner. And it's not going to happen overnight. You have to do it every single day. And yes, you're going to have people that will never see you that way. That's okay. That's okay. But you'll have enough. If you come with the right intentions and with integrity and authenticity, all the good stuff, people see that. And obviously competence, right? Like if you know what you're doing, you know your stuff. And obviously you know that you have to modify things because you're not going to always have the right answer. But like sometimes you got to take the risk and be willing to be wrong. And you have to calculate that you know, especially as marketing leaders. Like if you're talking about, you know, managing a big budget, like that's easier said than done because you've got to be mindful about this is not your money, but you treat it like it's yours. And so you have to be careful about your risks and the tolerance. And what I would say there is, you know, just make sure that you're constantly communicating what the plans are and make sure that you have the right buy-in. I'm not saying majority buy-in, depends on how your company is structured, but like you get the right buy-in that it's signed off, that they understand what we're trying to accomplish here. You know, when we went through a rebranding, Stream's name, you know, it's perfect because it's about water and thinking about like how can we stand out as a commercial real estate firm. If you think about the element of water and when I looked at the values of Stream and you listen to the founders and what they were trying to accomplish, it all goes back to the transformative nature of that particular element, water. They you know, it can cut through the hardest surfaces, but it can do so, you know, without overbearing, without floods. Like it can be slow, it can be fast. It was such a perfect way to describe and make it something that people can really relate to by looking at. We started with what were the values of Stream? What did we say about ourselves that we were trying to communicate to the world? And then how do we align it to that word stream? And you know, the founders will say, this Mike McVean and Lee Belland, who are pretty awesome. They like to fish, you know, and that's really how it came about. But when you think about and just kind of how they empower, like they're about hiring the right people and empowering them to act so that you can literally the most beneficial to a client. Because if you're not, you know, encumbered by layers of hierarchy, then you're going to be most beneficial to the clients that we serve. And so looking at that, you know, and being able to work with a group of marketers, we created a strike team for the brand. We did not hire out for this because it's very expensive, and we wanted to. We're working on a smaller budget, so we created a strike team of some of the best marketing people on the platform, and that was the outcome of that. So I think it stands out. I think it can evolve. We change the water imagery but the articulation of the value stream will remain pretty solid um, for a long time to come. And we wanted that. We wanted that brand and that the visual assets to be sustainable, you know, and to evolve. So it works and it aligns perfectly with, you know, where the company is headed.
I love that. And I feel like the sense that I get from, all the messaging I see about Stream, like I get the sense of innovation. Like it's very innovative. Like I feel like it's a very fresh sort of look and feel compared to some of the other brokerage firms that I see. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. So
Yeah.
last question, but this is kind of interesting. I was actually thinking about it. What is like the worst piece of advice you've ever received, and what's the best piece of advice that you want to share with others? Like the worst advice, because people give advice, and some of them you're just like, oh.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of advice. I've had some really great mentors and champions in my career, so I've been very fortunate to have had that. But The worst piece of advice would be to simply walk away, to shut down, to not speak the truth when it was a benefit to the company or and the team. I've had that advice, and I sadly more than once by people in leadership positions that I it kind of took me aback because I'm like, wait a minute, what? Just it's almost like, to be politically savvy, you you sometimes have to quiet your voice, but I think sometimes for the detriment of the firm, and I think that's really wrong. Um, so the best piece of advice is the opposite of that, and, uh, it's like and right now, Chris Jackson, who's the CEO of Stream, and Martin People, who brought me over to Stream, I'd say they both have given me this advice on multiple occasions, but you just you're not always going to be liked. You've got to pretty much speak the truth as you see it. You may be challenged on that, right? Like you may not be seeing it the right way, and you also have to be aware of that. But just say it. Just if you see something that doesn't feel right, doesn't seem right, then just say it. But know that there are going to be people that are not going to be happy that you said it, and that's okay because it creates, you know, conversation, and ultimately it brings either the problem that you think is the problem to the surface, but oftentimes there are other underlying things that it brings to the surface that gets remedied because somebody says something that they see is just not working. It's when people don't take it, like, even if it's outside of your lane, by the way. Like, I will also say with Stream, like, you have your expertise, but they don't like the term lanes because it sounds like you're not gonna be accountable to something where if you need to, like, help in a certain area, you should supply the help because you have maybe a skill set that can do that. But that same thing applies that if you see something wrong outside of your vertical, outside of your area of accountability, you should say something, and it will help the company be better, you know? So,
I love that. And one of the best advices you've ever given me personally from our years of working together was be okay with uncertainty and being
oh,
flexible because I had the most difficult time with that. And I remember clearly, and I think about that a lot these days. It's just like, yeah, that's part of like the growth mindset. You can't just be in control all the time
yeah,
and you just have to go with the flow. So I still remember that.
that's awesome.
But thank you, Susan, for your time. I mean, I
Mhm.
loved our talk, and I'll definitely insert your bio and everything, so that people can learn more about your, professional background and just connect with you. So I'll be sure to do it in the description box. But thank you. I appreciate your time and come back again. We have a lot more to talk about. So thank you so much.